All right, guys, in today's video, I'm gonna show you how to instantly stop swinging over the top. There's a 3-part drill that myself and Steve are gonna do that has helped literally thousands of our students. Keep in mind when you're doing this, you must make sure the club face gets square to close. That is essential when fixing your over the top downswing. Let's dive in. Let me show you how you're gonna fix yours right now. Steve, so in terms of fixing the over the top, I know with a lot of the students that we see, we actually end up fixing the over the top oftentimes by fixing the pieces earlier on or presetting some things in their swing earlier on. And in this video today, we've got 1 or 2 little setup pieces, a couple of main backswing feels, and then a main drill station for you guys to use to fix the over the top. Steve, let's start with the setup. Maybe what we want to have in and then what the bad looks like. So let's say we're starting fresh and we're like, hey, what am I supposed to do if I want to preset or put pieces in to help swing more from inside?
Yeah, perfect. Because a lot of it's already, you see someone set up to it and they set up poorly, you already know they're going to swing across or have a good inclination or by the way that their body is positioned. So I would say if we start from, we'll start from the ground up, the hips. So we could say that the hips relative to the target line would be closed. So they feel like they're twisted. So the right hip might be pushed back a little bit more. And then making our way up to the shoulder. We'd start with the right shoulder.
And then I'm pushing that back a little bit without closing my stance per se.
Well, the knee would close a little bit as well.
Okay,
So
but I'm not pulling the foot back necessarily?
No, no. So your stance would be, say, square.
Okay.
And then you'd have the right hip would be back, so then the knees would twist a little bit, so the right knee would also be back.
Okay.
So it's like right knee would be back, right hip would be back closed, and then making our way up to the right shoulder. The right shoulder would be retracted back. So you'd have knee, hip, and shoulder pulled back. So it feels like you're twisted.
Okay.
Right? It feels to you like your body might be aimed towards right field if you're at home plate in baseball.
Okay.
And then making our way down to the elbow, we would have the pocket of the elbow right here would be at a right angle to the stance line.
Okay.
And that's you feeling like the right arm from down the line is more underneath of the left.
More underneath of the left.
Yep.
So for someone who's not used to that, that's going to probably feel more bent.
Definitely. It's going to feel like it's more flexed, and it's also going to feel like it's more forward towards the belly button.
And maybe compared to, if this is the bad.
Yeah, so do that again. So the right shoulder's pushed forward or protracted. You have the right arm too straight. And if you look at here, the pocket of the elbow is pointed at the target.
Okay.
That also, I have to say this, that also has a direct effect on the right hand grip being weaker as well.
That's right. Okay. And so the good version then, if I go the hip and let's say the hip's back, the shoulder's back, and the arm is under.
Correct.
Is that kind of an easy way to start with?
Yes.
And so let me hit one with this first. So if someone's like has the over the top motion, these would be the pieces we would put in at the setup.
Right away.
Yeah, right away. Okay, so let's do that here. So the hip and the shoulder feel like pulled. And when you say retracted, for someone who doesn't know what that means, that's like just pulling your shoulder back.
Yeah, because someone's pushing on you, and pushing your shoulder back
your shoulder
behind
blades
you.
Pulled. Okay.
Correct.
Shoulder blades pulled back. Hip back, shoulder back, arm under. And now we use this plane station, guys, with just the stick right over the golf ball. I've seen Steve do different variations of it that are really cool. There's lots of ways to do this. But as you're trying to fix your over the top, I would say at least 90%, 80, 90% of the time, we're going to put like a plane station in, some kind of swing station.
Something to the right of the ball or like this over top of the ball. It's fine. Just to give the golfer the visual of how the sweet spot needs to be more coming down.
Yeah, okay. Just to help with like the feels and the
Absolutely.
visual. Okay. Okay, so hip back, shoulder back. So I'm going to hit one. Here we go. Arm under.
Yep.
And now in the beginning, I'm just going to try and feel like that club works underneath the stick. We'll kind of go full but slow here.
Yep, ball curve to the left.
Yeah, and there's a solid one for me. That's probably like let's say a 10-yard draw. Now, I'm coming from someone who already draws the ball. So if anything, when I'm doing this, I would see more draw than normal, let's say.
And more push as well.
More push. If you're coming from big pulls, big fades, or slices, you're going to probably put these in to just work from like fade back to straight, maybe even in the beginning.
Say neutral.
Yeah, less of whatever the bad shot is.
Correct.
Okay, so when you guys are doing this, I'll do one more, then we'll do the backswing, Steve. So I'm taking my normal setup, plane stations in, hips back, shoulder feels pulled back, arm feels down and forward.
Yeah, towards the belly button. You'd be putting it, or towards the midline. The elbow would be towards the midline as you're doing it.
So I'm presetting those in. My stance feels fairly square, but my body feels a little twisted.
Right.
Okay, got it. And that's to help swing the club from inside, not over the top.
Yeah, you're building in a swing direction more to the right just by getting the body positions right in the setup.
Got it, okay. And then from the setup pieces, and obviously if you're just starting this, you can stay on that for a little bit, right, until that feels normal. And with all these pieces, I think we would say the same thing. We really want you to put in as little as needed to start with. Like if you just do those setup pieces and that fixes this over the top motion and helps you swing inside.
Yeah, you could be someone that like swings across the ball, say 10 degrees, and you make these adjustments just at the setup, and you might go from 10 to say -3. You're
right,
going to be
exactly.
7 degrees less across the ball, just by doing the setup and the body positions correct.
Okay, so we move from there, let's say, into the backswing pieces.
Okay.
And one of the things that I like that you say is if you guys reference the butt of the club at setup, like let's say we put a line up or down from the butt of the club. If I want to get a downswing that swings more from inside, that's easier to do from a position where the butt of the club has traveled more inward or deeper on the way back. If you're someone who swings over the top and your backswing relative to this butt of the club line goes basically straight up and has no depth at all, could you make up for that? Sure. It's much more difficult and less likely. And so really during the backswing, we want to get depth to the butt of the club. And a lot of that, Steve, I see you coaching and with a lot of the improvements of our members by how the bodies work.
Yeah, start there.
Yeah. So if I take my setup position, hips back, shoulders back, arms down and forward, what am I looking to do with, let's say, my shoulder, like as a reference point?
Yeah, so we would say that your trail shoulder, your right shoulder, would move around the spine to the midline on the backswing. So I'd say right shoulder goes to the midline.
And when we say midline, let's say from this angle?
So if I'm holding this club up, right down the center of the body, you want to have the right shoulder move all the way around the spine to the midline. That's the feel.
And that shoulder, when that happens, Steve, what does that help with the depth of the butt of the club?
Oh yeah. Yep. Okay, so that's one part of it. I mean, that's one part of it.
And when someone's working on this, I'm just feeling in the beginning like that, I'm just visualizing that center line of my body, or if I had a line here and trying to get that around.
Around to the midline.
Yeah.
And so I want to say one more thing to that. Do your setup. By having the setup proper, where you have your shoulder retracted back in the setup, you're already pre-setting more shoulder turn. So we always like to use the example of like shoulders to 90 degrees.
Yep.
Let's say you have your shoulder pulled back, say 8 degrees already. So now your shoulders only have to turn 82 degrees.
Right.
Get back. You're building in more turn in the setup by having that shoulder there. So it makes it easier to get the right shoulder to the midline on the backswing.
So the good, getting the shoulder to the midline, gets this butt of the club deeper, let's say kind of hands behind the trail shoulder.
Yep, that's fine.
And this is something I've struggled with, especially if I don't practice for a long time, where I don't do that enough. And so you'll see sometimes for me, and if you get over the top and pulls, so mine, when I do the poor version, like if you guys are over the top and you don't get the trail shoulder around enough, let's say it only gets to here, it stays on this side of the body, the arms don't get deep enough, the buttock doesn't get deep enough on the way back. And then for me to come from inside, I've got to start to do a bunch of different things that usually lead to poor contact, inconsistencies, etc. And so we really want to make sure, I think that's such a good checkpoint there, Steve. The shoulder works around to the midline.
Right.
Shoulder to the midline. And what about the hip as that's happening?
The right hip would do the same thing. So you'd have right shoulder to the midline, right hip would move around to the midline as well. And that you get the hip there by changing the knee flex, bending the left, straightening the right, and moving that hip all the way around, shoulder all the way around. And that's the beginning of getting the butt of the club and the arms moving around the spine as well on the backswing. On the backswing.
Okay, so let me hit with that there. So I've got my setup pieces in here, right? I'm be practicing this if you're over the top.
Yep.
I've got the arm under, the hip and the shoulder back a little bit.
Feel twisted.
Twisted. I'm gonna feel the hip and the shoulder to the midline. Let's go ahead and do that here. Hip and shoulder to the midline.
Nice one.
Yeah, that felt pretty good. So if you're like me, who doesn't do that enough, that's gonna feel like more turn than normal. It feels like it takes an extra half a second than normal because I'm continuing to turn, and it feels a little longer
You know, probably in a foreign spot. You also might not realize how far behind you your hands and arms need to move as well.
Yeah, right, right. Okay, so one more with those, Steve. So the setup piece, and you guys do this with me here too. Hip back, shoulder back, arms under.
Twisted.
Twisted. Hip and shoulder to the midline. Kind of feels like my hands are behind my shoulder is the sensation.
To some people, it may feel like they're down by their waist because of how high their arms are.
Yeah, let's talk about that next too. So obviously us getting this setup preset like that, us getting the backswing body motions is all to get the arms and hands back there, but let's touch on that piece as well.
Yep.
On the arms, Steve, and sort of like part 3 to this,
yep.
I've seen you doing, this comes from me watching you give the online lessons, right? I see these
yep.
students before and afters. The feel of the trail arm really working around.
Yep.
And so why do you do that with one arm only, and like what are the feels and goals of that?
I think it's helpful to feel one arm only, to have the right arm, or more specifically the humerus bone, move all the way around the spine. And they could really feel how the butt of the club is way behind the right shoulder to get the depth part of it right. That you can also, you know, make the argument too that pulling the arm or abducting the arm around helps move the shoulder.
Okay, so those two pieces will work together.
Correct.
And the goal here, especially from the golfer we're talking about who's probably too up in here, it's to like exaggerate that feel to get into
do that one more time.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we'll hold a shaft. Just go back to the setup. Sometimes we'll hold a shaft here right along the right shoulder.
Yep.
And I don't think people realize how far their hands need to go behind them to miss the grip right here. Feel how deep that is?
Yep.
So it's not only the shoulder and the hip that helps. You have to keep moving your right arm around the spine as well to help get the depth.
And all of that makes it easier for it to come down inside. Less
I would, yes, but I'd also say getting the setup makes it easier to get to the top of the backswing.
Yeah, each step like makes the next one easier and easier.
That's the way I would do it.
So as you guys are practicing this, and maybe Steve, what they can do is maybe they do like 1 or 2 or 3 to feel the arm work around.
Yep.
As they're doing this.
I think that's a great one to do.
Okay. And then I'm trying to combine that arm around feel
with the hip and the shoulder.
The hip and the shoulder, okay. So the setup, hip and shoulder back, arms down and forward. So I'm feeling the hip and the shoulder to the midline and the arm around. Hip and shoulder to the midline, arm around.
That was your biggest push.
Yeah. And that still for me would feel pretty good.
Oh yeah.
And it's like feels noticeably deeper. Like I can feel that I haven't been doing this great. It's something that I need to focus on too when we're doing it. But for you guys watching, if you're the guy, if you come too far over and you get those pulls or you get those fades, you're gonna need to be feeling these things just to work towards straight.
Yes.
Like I already draw the ball, so I expect bigger pushes and hooks when this happens. But if you clicked on this video and you're trying to fix your over the top, all these are gonna make it much easier. Let's do one more like that. So the kind of drill we're doing here is the trail arm around, and I'm feeling like that shoulder blade's pulling around when I'm doing that, yeah?
As well as the hip.
As well as the hip, okay. So preset the setup, 1 or 2 or 3 of those. Hip and shoulder are back, arms, right arm's under the left and forward from down the line.
Yep, pocket of the arms at a right angle to the stance line.
Not this way.
Correct.
Okay. Hip and shoulder to the midline, arm around. Let's do one more of those. Hip and shoulder to the midline, arm around.
Nice one.
Yeah, and there's a nice high, solid draw. So guys, whether you're using this practice station with the stick over or some sort of downswing practice station to get feedback with the club, works really good with this. I've seen Steve do variations of this for like hundreds of our members that go from swinging way too far over the top to on plane and get much better. So getting the setup pieces, getting the backswing pieces to help set up the downswing in combo with a some sort of plane station and a nice square club face is the recipe to fix that over the top. Steve, appreciate you being out here as always. Thank you guys for watching. Any questions, leave a comment down below.